is Tamara, and I'm so happy to be here this morning with you because Gina said we are all chosen for blessing. We are all chosen for blessing. Each one of you and myself, the Lord thought up before the foundation of the world. He thought of Tiana and Gina and Mary and Linda and all of you were thought up before the foundation of the world as God's poema. And poema means we are all uniquely created. There is no one like you in this whole world. And it's wonderful because the Lord created each of us with a purpose, as a person in His full narrative, in His full masterpiece of what He is doing in this world. And when we find that purpose, when we get in sync with what God has created us to do, that's where we find fullness of life. That's where we find you're chosen for blessing. And that's where we find joy and peace and excitement and why the heck am I in this world? Because I have found in my life that, you know what? There's been times in my life, many, that I'm like, this world stinks. I do not like being here. I don't know why I'm here. What is the purpose of everything? I never knew why I was created. Growing up, I made more of a masterpiece of how could I be the color of chameleon that works. The color of chameleon that just wanted to be the color of chameleon that could hide and be safe. So my whole life, I didn't know who I was. I just wanted to be what would work, what would be safe in that moment. That's how I learned to be. So as I grew up in a very small town in southern Illinois, almost into Kentucky. So I grew up on a farm, even though I loved the Vogue magazine. I did grow up on a farm. And, you know, I was the strange one of the town because I always liked, you know, being unique and I loved sewing stuff on my clothes. And I remember at school, you know, I had friends, but I was always the one that stood out. And I remember my maiden name was Cook. And I remember back the guys used to say, well, that Tammy Cook is nice and all, but she's strange. So that was kind of who I was my whole life. I didn't know how to be. I never really belonged. And I just tried to make my way. And of course, when I went to school, I got a degree in sales and then a master's in public relations because I'm a chameleon. I can be anything, you know, just this color, that color, what angle do you want? I've practiced it all. That's who I am. That was my whole life, just to be safe. But I was miserable. And I made my way to Springfield, Illinois. That was a big city for me. Springfield, Illinois, small town. But that's where the state capitol is. And as I was getting my master's degree in public relations, I decided my heart started coming out. I wanted to help people, but I didn't know what that meant. And I started seeing there were organizations and there were children that were being beaten. There were women that were being raped, and it was all right there in front of me. And I said, I want to be a part. I want to do something. So my part in the narrative then was I became a lobbyist. And I lobbied, I was right there in the state capitol, and I lobbied for not-for-profits raising money for them so that they could help others. That's all I knew to do at the time. I then met my ex-husband, and he was a lawyer. And when I grew up from a small town, the mentality was, you find a good man with a good job, you marry him, and you'll be okay. there's no encouragement to find out, why did God create me? Who am I? What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? That was never discussed where I grew up. Find a good man with a good job, and you'll be taken care of. For me. And again, the identity that was started in me, I left to be the identity that my then husband wanted me to be. So he moved us to Chicago. Now, I thought Springfield was a big town. I go to Chicago, I'm like, what? We don't have a car? You walk everywhere you go. And talk about culture shock. So I remember going to the grocery store and people, grabbing around, like, I gotta go home, I'm not used to all these people, And, but within, a few months, I really got to love Chicago and the city of Chicago and city life. However, that's when I had left my identity back in Springfield, Illinois, so I'm like, well, what am I going to do? Well, my ex-husband at the time was building his law practice. I helped him with that. But he said, well, why don't you go back to what you did in undergraduate school? You could do modeling. So I did that, and I just was starting a slow death inside because I wasn't using the gifting that God gave me, which was my heart and my mind. And we started to make a lot of money and traveling. And I had the home of my dreams. I had everything I ever wanted. We would go out, we would party, I had anything. I designed my own furniture. I had everything. But I was miserable. I was empty. And I thought, I must be crazy or something. There would be people that would kill for my life. I was miserable, and I couldn't figure out why. And my ex-husband was like, you're spoiled, and you're nuts, I don't understand, and, you have everything and you're miserable. And I thought it was nuts. And I sat there one night, and thank you, Lord, for the church. Good women like you coming together. We lived a double life. And we would go to church, but yet we would party. And I remember sitting there, and I would go, and there were women that surrounded me. And one woman took me aside, and she said, Tamara, I'm noticing a change in you, and I love you either way, but I want you to know you're going down a bad road. And that's when the Lord really spoke to my heart. He said, Tamara, this life is not what you were created for. You are chosen for blessing. I said, oh, Lord, thank you. Thank you for understanding me. Thank you for understanding this hollowness that I'm feeling. It doesn't make sense to me. I want the life you created me for, Lord. Please, whatever it is, help me get on your track for my life. And the Lord right then started to make a difference in me, started changing me. I didn't want to go out and party anymore. I didn't really feel like, I wanted to go and buy all these things that would give me a high for the moment. I didn't want to reach out for alcohol or drugs. I wanted to learn what it was like to live a walk-the-talk Christian life. And the Lord, when I made that choice, He put strong women beside me that could love me wherever I was. As many times as I messed up, they would help me pick up, and they would show me, this is how we handle it. This is what we do. We pray to the Lord. He will show. He will provide. And He sure did. It doesn't mean that times won't be hard. Times got really tough for me because one day my ex-husband came home and he says, either you go back to the woman I married or leave. And that was my crossroads. And I chose the path God created me for. And that meant walking out of the home of my dreams, walking away from all of my beautiful clothes, my stuff, my everything, and walking out into the unknown. And that's when the Lord started to really transform. Because when you say yes to the Lord, sure, it's confusing, it's tough, but there's a peace, there's a fullness that starts to fill your heart and excitement. Like, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm on track with the Lord. And that's all that matters. And he ended up there was a friend of mine that lived in Marina Del Rey. He said, I have a home, I just bought it as a guest house. You can rent the guest house from me if you need somewhere to go. 3 months later, I packed what I could, and here I was. January 1st, 2004, staking Tamara's new life. Didn't know what that meant. I sat on the couch bawling my eyes out so many days. Oh, what did I just do? What did I just do? But I had this peace that the Lord was calling me forth because we are all chosen for blessing. God has a specific purpose for each one of you, for me, that He allows us to participate in what He's doing in this world. So 2 years it took me to clean up, figure out which way was up, get stuff sorted out. And I started at Bel Air Presbyterian Church. I would hide for a long time, just figuring out which way was up, getting cleaned up. And then it was after that the Stephen Ministry was there. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the Stephen Ministry. It's a wonderful ministry to where you're trained for 2 years to walk alongside people who are going through crisis. So I'm like, awesome. I can be trained to learn how to help myself while I'm being trained to help others. This is good. I'm all about efficiency, So I just felt called to that. And as I was starting to be trained as a Stephen minister, that's when my heart started to grow, and the Lord opened my eyes to the women and the men out there that are just broken and just desperate for anything. But what they need is the Lord. And I trained there for 2 years and served in the Stephen ministry for another 2 years. And when in that time, then the leadership came up to me and, Tamara, we're noticing gifting in you. Have you ever thought about ministry? I'm like, what does that mean? Well, you got to go back to school. Nope. I don't want to go back to school. I said, just pray about it. And as I continued in the Stephen ministry and continued as a deacon in the church in different areas of ministry, my heart just grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, this is what I'm called to do. I'm called to be a voice of hope, that there is another side, that you can say yes to the Lord, to what He's calling you forth to do. He will get you, equipped to whatever He's calling you to. He'll bring support alongside. And here we are. I went to Fuller Seminary, and I graduated. It took me 5 years to get through. And I graduated last year. And the year prior to my graduation, God is so much fun to work for. I start praying. I'm like, okay, Lord, what are you calling me to? I'm ready for anything. And the Lord said, I need you to be prepared to go anywhere, anytime, and speak and offer hope to the brokenhearted. I said, great. I said, but Lord, I'm willing to do anything. However, you know me. I'm an introvert. Introvert means, how I was trained, it means you got to be alone to recharge. So I have to have my own little sacred space, with my books here, my teacup, everything's placed in the right spot. And I said, the whole idea of unpacking and repacking and unpacking and repacking, I'm willing to do whatever you want, but I'm just a little concerned. And right then, what flashed across my mind was a white RV. I thought, ingenious. I get to take my home with me where I go. My tea will be here, my books will be here, everything's with me. I can go wherever the Lord wants me. And I said, all right, I guess I gotta go RV shopping. So I happened to be taking a class for Fuller before I graduated down in Irvine. There's a satellite campus in Irvine, and every time I drove down, I would see Mike Thompson's RV. So when I'm like, and I go in, and this guy comes out, and he's looking at me. And I said, okay, the Lord has called me to ministry. I need to be able to start moving around. I don't know what it means, but I need to take my home with me, and what do you think? I said, the Lord has called me to ministry. I'm graduating from Fuller Seminary in June, and I'm called to be a pastor, and the Lord needs me to go around and give hope to the brokenhearted, and what do you think? I got the RV for you, he says. And he comes up, and he says, I have a fifth-wheel RV. It opens up in the back. He's like, you can preach right out the back door. So that was my journey. And I happened to be, my mom was visiting on my spring break. This was March, before I graduated in June. And my mom, we had some time one day, and she said, well, why don't we, my family's used to me by now. Remember, I was the weird one, and so any of these ideas or visions are like, okay, we'll see, you know. So my mom said, let's go take a look at these RVs that you've been talking about. I said, okay. And so we go into Mike Thompson's, and we're there, and we look around, and she's like, okay, we'll see how this goes. I'm like, the Lord has a plan. She's like, okay. So we were leaving there, and I asked them, I said, will you write down a couple of RV parks that I can drive by and see what because I'm from Southern Illinois, and we got trailer parks. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, Lord, I'll do anything for you, but I'm like, I just want to see what the trailer parks look like here. So, first of all, I was delighted to go, these RVs are nice. They don't have these in Southern Illinois when I was growing up. You know, so I go in, I'm like, Lord, all right, we're on to something here. So, he writes down a couple of them, and my mom and I get in the car, and we're driving out, and I'm looking on the list. My GPS wouldn't work. I couldn't find them for anything. My mom's like, well, there's one. I'm like, it's not on the list. We're going to keep driving. We got to find these. It's on the list. I'm like, she's like, okay, I got to drive. I couldn't find it. It's getting dark. I'm like, fine. Let's just turn around and go back to that one that you saw. So we go back in, and I park the car, and I go into the office there, and there was a girl with a cross on her. I said, you're a Christian? She said, yeah. And I said, oh my gosh, you got to pray for me. The Lord's wanted her in an RV, and I don't know. I'm going to drive around. I got to offer hope, and I don't know. I said, you got to pray. She said, wow, this is so neat. And she's like, hold on, I'll be right back. She went and got her husband. They manage the park. And they said, Tamara, we're so glad to meet you. We've been praying to start some sort of ministry for months, but we don't know what to do. And I said, They said, do you think you would be willing to come here? Sure. Where the heck else am I going to go, right? Sure. And the husband then said, and don't go to some dealership. I'm like, why? And he said, because I'm a dealer, you could actually go to the manufacturer's plant and build whatever you want, and they will just charge you a little over manufacturer's pricing. So I actually got to go to the plant and build what I wanted for the ministry, to have a mobile chapel with me. And they made it and delivered it. I graduated in June. They made it. They came up to, believe it or not, this is how good God is when you say yes. They drove all the way up to Marina Del Rey, helped me pack. I didn't have much stuff, but they packed what they could in my RV and drove it all the way down to New Linden PCH and parked me. And that's where I've been ever since. And I'm like, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? And it started out that the manager of the park needed help in the office. And I said, great, I need some money. So I started working in the office, so it would give me time to get the ministry together, see what the Lord was calling me to specifically. And at that time, I got to know all about RV living. People would come in, they would share this is a lifestyle. Did you know this? People live, they go here, and then they go here, and then they go here. And I'm like, this is awesome. So I got to know all about RV living, and at the same time, I got to know the people that live there full time. And there are 49 RVs at this RV park, 1 to 6 people per RV. that have either lost their homes to do foreclosure. They have to be there to care for an elderly parent that lives next by. They have to be there near Hope Hospital because they're on chemo or have some sort of illness. They have to go get treatment. They're going through divorce. Now, I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know what it's like to be on the other side, in sync with God's purpose, chosen for blessing. And that is my mission at the RV park, is to offer that hope to others as they are restarting. So we have an RV, and it makes sense. Here's me on the farm. It is true, I did live on a farm. I never learned how to ride a bike until I was 26. Because I grew up on a three-wheeler, four-wheeler. Why learn how to ride a bike? I got one that's motorized. So God's calling me. And I say, please send me whatever you have for me, Lord. And that's the first step, is total surrender to whatever the Lord has for your life, to be in sync with what He has created you for. But God is calling, please send me. So this was my plan. And I just had a piece. If I focused on Christ's face, putting my foot forward into the steps illuminated that He would light up before me, sensing His vision ahead, and knowing that the Lord would take care of all the details. And He did, right? All the way up to where I'm living, providing the RV for me, everything. He does take care of all the details when we say yes. Here I am at the manufacturer's plant. I got to see how they were made. It was so, I had the plastic glasses on. And I'm like, yeah, but can this be that color? And all the guys are like, so it was so much fun. Here they are building. I'm taking pictures of things that I want. And this is not mine, but just to give you a glance. Nice, huh? Yeah. Right? I sit there and I'm like, in Colossians it says that the Lord knows what will delight our hearts most. For no eyes have seen nor ears have heard what God has planned for those who love Him and follow in His ways and say yes. I thought that was the home of my dreams in Chicago. This is the home of my dreams. It's so exciting. And I can take it anywhere. This is the living quarters. And in here, mine's a little different because this is the one I was looking at the time. I had this sliding glass, and in here is the chapel. So right here, this is my living quarters. So I go in and out this door. But here I have a curtain that blocks off. So anyone that comes for ministry or teaching or prayer, they come in through this door. And I'm called to do preaching, evangelism, pastoral counseling, training, and I'm also set up to do disaster relief. So that's my arm. So I'm called to be a light there. Here, I get to share my life, and Pastor Gary is mentoring me. I'm on the ordination track to be ordained as a pastor. And I'm telling you, even though life is hard sometimes, as Pastor Gary said, God is still good. And this is where I'm at, Huntington by the CRV Park. Here's staking the claim for Jesus across the whole RV park. Because everyone at the RV park, if they can look up and see the cross, they know where to come and get a breath of fresh air of the Holy Spirit and find hope. And the ministry is called Hope for Life Chapel. So preaching, this is the whole back door comes down. I take people over for fellowship at the beach right there. Evangelism. And this is the last edition that the Lord blessed me with, is a little missionary puppy. He is a missionary for Jesus. And I call him Joby, after Job in the Bible. Because as I'm walking him around, I try to walk him once or twice a day, and he comes out. Everybody loves Joby. Or they want to come over and see Joby. And we start talking. And they'll, after a while, say, why did you name him Job? And he says, it's after Job in the Bible. Job went through horrible things. He lost everything. But it's all about Job 42, that God restores and replenishes, and there is life. Disaster relief, I'm set up to do that, so if something happens, I can pull out and go wherever I'm needed and have a mobile chapel with me. And I do pastoral counseling, and this is what the chapel looks like inside. So my RV, I'm so blessed to be here. I'm so blessed to be connected with a church that has such a desire to offer hope and restoration and come alongside people that are hurting. I'm so happy and blessed to be mentored by Pastor Gary. He's taught me so much already. And you have no idea, when the Lord said, connect with CPC, go to CPC, and I came here, and I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord, I'm not alone. And you all are chosen for blessing. You all have a purpose. And that's what this study is about. We're studying the book of Ezra. And the book of Ezra, I love history. I don't know if any of you love history. I love history. So what we've had going on in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and an overview with 1st and 2nd Chronicles, basically how it started out is the Israelites, first they said, well, you know, God, we like you, but we want to be like everybody else. We want a king. They wanted to do things their own way. So they started doing things their own way. I know about that. And as they started doing things their own way and choosing not to walk in sync with God and the plan God had for them, stuff started getting upheaval, they would get attacked, they would start to just have all these problems. I definitely know about that. And then we get to 1st and 2nd Kings, where basically they lose everything. They lose everything. And now we are to the book of Ezra, where they are finally coming home. God is calling them home. And what does it look like to rebuild? What does it look like to come home and rebuild? What does it look like to come home and allow the Lord to show you and help you gain wisdom from the mistakes we've made, or from choosing other things like shopping, drinking, drugs, anything to satisfy instead of God? What does it look like to make the wrong choices and then lose everything? And then the Lord gives us wisdom as to why it's better to walk in His footsteps. I learned the hard way. So if my message is, if you hear anything, get in sync with the Lord and what the Lord has planned for your life, because that is where fullness of life is. And now in the book of Ezra, the Israelites are coming home, and they're going to be rebuilding the house of God and seeking God first and learning what that means. And that's what we're going to be studying this season together.